Freedom of speech is often regarded as one of the most fundamental rights in a democratic society. It serves as a cornerstone of personal liberty, a shield for dissenting voices, and a platform for social change. However, while freedom of speech is deeply valued, it is not absolute, particularly within the context of judicial settings such as courtrooms where order, decorum, and respect for institutional authority take precedence. Understanding how freedom of speech is balanced against the unique environment of a courtroom offers valuable insight into how laws function to maintain both individual rights and collective stability. In most democratic constitutions, the right to speak one's mind is protected to ensure that citizens can participate fully in public life. People can criticize governments, debate policies, advocate for causes, and share unpopular opinions without fear of censorship or persecution. This freedom is essential in fostering a society where ideas can evolve and accountability is possible. However, this same principle must be interpreted in a way that also protects the integrity of institutions, especially the judiciary. A courtroom is not simply another public venue. It is a highly structured environment with defined protocols and hierarchies designed to uphold fairness, impartiality, and justice. Unlike public parks, social media platforms, or protest arenas, the courtroom operates under strict codes of conduct. Judges, attorneys, jurors, and other legal professionals rely on decorum to conduct proceedings in a respectful and orderly fashion. This requirement exists not to suppress speech, but to preserve the seriousness of the legal process, and to ensure that all participants, regardless of background, are treated equitably. In this setting, when someone speaks out of turn, uses inflammatory language, or directs personal insults at the judicial bench or participants, the disruption is not merely rude, it can actively interfere with the process of justice. That is where the legal concept of contempt of court becomes relevant. Contempt is not about punishing an opinion. It is about addressing behavior that obstructs the administration of justice or shows disrespect to the authority of the court. For instance, if someone walks into a courtroom during an ongoing trial and begins shouting political slogans, their right to express political beliefs is not being denied when they are removed or fined. Rather, they are being held accountable for violating the procedures that allow the court to function properly. This balance is delicate. On one side is the individual's right to express themselves. On the other is the institution's need to maintain focus, discipline, and impartiality. The purpose of courtroom decorum is not to elevate judges or legal officers above others, but to create a level playing field where disputes are resolved according to evidence and law, not emotions or power dynamics. When emotions erupt in a courtroom, whether from the public gallery or from participants, it introduces bias, confusion, or intimidation. A judge's responsibility is not only to interpret the law, but also to safeguard the environment in which that interpretation occurs. That often means drawing lines that outside of a courtroom would seem restrictive or even unfair. This concept can be compared to other specialized settings. Take, for example, a classroom during an exam. While students may generally have the right to talk freely outside class, speaking loudly during a test would disrupt others and compromise fairness. In the same way, a courtroom restricts certain behaviors, not because expression is unwelcome, but because the integrity of the process must be protected. It's also important to consider the symbolic power of the courtroom. For many people, the court represents a space where justice is not only practiced but seen to be practiced. Allowing the courtroom to descend into a space of uncontrolled rhetoric or hostility could undermine public confidence in the rule of law. Courts must therefore present themselves as bastions of neutrality, structure, and decorum. By enforcing rules about speech and behavior, the judiciary reinforces the notion that legal processes are serious and sacred, not subject to chaos or personal vendettas. There is also an educational dimension to how freedom of speech is treated within judicial settings. Every courtroom interaction has the potential to model civic behavior. People who attend court, whether in person or through media coverage, observe how participants behave and how disagreements are handled. When individuals see that strong, Feelings must still be expressed with respect and within boundaries. It reinforces the idea that a society can hold space for dissent without descending into disorder. This modeling becomes especially important in moments of high public tension, when emotions run high, and the temptation to use legal venues as stages for protest is strong. Additionally, it is worth examining how freedom of speech is preserved outside the courtroom to compensate for its limitations within. People are not barred from expressing their grievances about the justice system, political figures, or controversial decisions in other public forums. They can write articles, create documentaries, organize rallies, or take to social media. The restriction within courtrooms is specific and contextual. It does not extend beyond the courtroom walls. This is a key distinction that underscores the maturity of a legal system, the ability to protect expression broadly while still maintaining boundaries where necessary. The idea that freedom comes with responsibility is central to this balance. Just as drivers are free to travel where they please but must obey traffic signals, so too are speakers free to share ideas but must respect the context in which they speak. In a courtroom, that means understanding when to remain silent, when to follow protocol, and when certain forms of expression, such as verbal outbursts, insults, or disruptions, are inappropriate. In sum, the freedom to speak one's mind remains a pillar of democracy. But the courtroom requires a specialized interpretation of that freedom. It is not a space to stifle ideas, but a space to resolve them. The balance between upholding individual expression and maintaining institutional order is delicate but necessary. By recognizing the unique role of judicial settings, citizens can better understand when their rights apply broadly and when those rights must be tempered by the needs of justice, order, and mutual respect. In the framework of legal systems around the world, the concept of contempt of court plays a crucial role in ensuring the smooth operation of judicial proceedings. Contempt of court, particularly when it results in consequences like fines or arrests, is often misunderstood. Many interpret it as an affront to free speech or personal liberty, but in reality, it serves a functional and necessary role within the structure of law and order. It is less about silencing individuals and more about preserving the dignity and effectiveness of the legal process. Contempt of court generally refers to actions that disrespect the court's authority, interfere with judicial proceedings, or disobey court orders. This can include overt disruptions such as shouting during a hearing, using derogatory language directed at court officials, refusing to comply with procedural directives, or even nonverbal displays that challenge the decorum of the court. The consequences for such actions, whether a monetary fine or an arrest, are not meted out as a punishment for opinion, but as a corrective measure to safeguard the judicial environment. The reason courts wield the power to issue fines or arrests in these situations is rooted in the need to maintain integrity. Legal proceedings demand a high degree of neutrality and structure. If the courtroom becomes a space where disorder is tolerated, the outcomes of those proceedings could be compromised. Witnesses might feel intimidated, jurors could be influenced, or the judge might be distracted from the matter at hand. Each of these possibilities threatens the fairness of the trial, which is the cornerstone of any justice system. When a person acts in contempt of court, they disrupt more than just a moment in time. They disrupt a process built on centuries of legal tradition. Courtrooms are not only spaces of adjudication, they are symbolic institutions where the rule of law is enacted in real time. Every case is a demonstration of the legal system in motion, and when someone defies its standards, that act reverberates beyond the immediate walls. It sets a precedent for what is tolerated, and as such, even a single outburst must often be addressed swiftly and clearly to prevent erosion of the court's authority. Fines, particularly significant ones, serve a dual purpose. On one hand, they act as a tangible repercussion for behavior deemed unacceptable within the courtroom setting. On the other, they function as a deterrent, sending a clear message that such conduct will not be overlooked. The value of the fine is not merely punitive. It is proportionate to the disruption caused and the potential damage to the public perception of the legal process. Just as rules in a school or workplace exist to ensure order and fairness, so too do courtroom protocols, except with far-reaching, consequences that affect people's rights, freedom, and future. Arrests, especially those that follow shortly after an act of contempt, are perhaps more visible and dramatic. Yet even these should be understood not as a reflection of overreach, but as a mechanism built into the legal structure to restore balance. The immediacy of such responses is often necessary. In a courtroom, where timing is critical and proceedings must continue without interruption, law enforcement officers or bailiffs are empowered to take quick action. This is not about silencing dissent or punishing emotion. It is about preserving the space for justice to unfold without obstruction. One of the key challenges in interpreting contempt-related consequences is separating the emotional content of the act from its procedural implications. A person may have deeply held beliefs or powerful emotional responses to a case. Those emotions, while valid, do not grant license to act in a way that derails the proceedings. The courtroom must remain impartial and unemotional precisely because it is charged with making decisions based on facts and law, not feelings. When a participant or observer allows emotion to translate into disruption, the court must act to maintain its neutral posture. It's also worth considering how such enforcement is guided by legal precedent and clear frameworks. Judges do not have free rein to act on personal preference when issuing fines or ordering arrests for contempt. Their authority is defined by statute and refined by decades, often centuries, of case law. They must assess the nature of the contempt, whether it was direct, happening in the presence of the court, or indirect, violating a court order outside the courtroom, and they must ensure that any punishment is appropriate to the severity of the act. In direct contempt cases, such as a verbal insult hurled during a trial, a judge can act swiftly and without a separate hearing, because the disruption occurred in full view of the court. Even then, due process remains vital. The person held in contempt must typically be informed of their offense and, in many cases, allowed an opportunity to explain themselves. This procedure helps ensure that the use of contempt power is not arbitrary, but rooted in fairness. There is also a broader social context to these consequences. Public trust in the justice system depends in part on its perceived strength and stability. When individuals witness behavior that seems to challenge judicial authority without consequence, they may question the system's ability to uphold laws fairly. By contrast, when the court responds promptly and proportionately to disruptive behavior, it reinforces the public's confidence that the legal process is secure and respected. Furthermore, contempt penalties can serve an educational purpose. They remind both participants and the public of the importance of procedure. Legal processes may seem rigid or overly formal at times, but that structure exists to ensure that all parties, no matter their wealth, status, or beliefs, are given a fair opportunity to present their case. Disruptions that challenge this structure risk tipping the balance, whether by delaying proceedings, influencing juries, or creating a hostile environment for witnesses and legal professionals. In many ways, the courtroom is one of the last truly structured public spaces, and maintaining that structure requires vigilance. The consequences for contempt are one of the tools courts use to defend that space, not to protect egos, but to protect the principles of law. While freedom of speech allows individuals to express themselves broadly in other settings, the courtroom remains a domain where freedom is exercised within a framework designed to deliver justice. In the judicial system, timing is more than just a logistical matter. It is often a reflection of how seriously a situation is regarded and how effectively the system can respond to threats against its integrity. The ability of the courts to respond quickly to disruptions or violations is not only necessary to preserve the immediate flow of proceedings, but also serves as a broader affirmation of institutional authority. When a courtroom disruption occurs, particularly one that challenges the decorum or authority of the court, the speed at which corrective action is taken can speak volumes about the structure and function of the legal process. Courtrooms operate within a tightly regulated system that prioritizes order, fairness, and impartiality. Any interruption to that order can derail the proceedings, influence participants, or introduce instability into what must remain a controlled environment. The legal system has evolved over time to ensure that responses to such disruptions are not delayed, Mechanisms like fines, warnings, and even arrests are built into the courtroom structure so that judges and officers of the court can act decisively and immediately when necessary. This immediacy is critical, not because the judiciary seeks to dominate or intimidate, but because allowing a disruption to linger without response could weaken the authority of the entire proceeding. This rapid response capability is often misunderstood by the public. Some may perceive swift legal actions, such as issuing a fine within minutes or ordering a courtroom arrest, as overreactions. In truth, they are measured tools designed to maintain the integrity of the court. The system does not act with haste, it acts with preparedness. Courtrooms are unique in that they bring together many elements, emotions, arguments, facts, and consequences, into a confined space with high stakes. Maintaining control of that space, especially during moments of tension or escalation, is a skill that judges and court officers must be ready to exercise at any moment. The architecture of a courtroom itself reflects this preparedness. Bailiffs or other law enforcement personnel are always present and strategically placed, not just for protection, but for rapid deployment should an incident arise. Judges are empowered, under legal statutes, to act instantly to preserve decorum, even without the need for a lengthy hearing or review. This legal authority has been affirmed over decades of case law and is carefully defined to avoid misuse. It ensures that those in charge of the courtroom are not left powerless in moments when disruption could turn dangerous or disorderly. Beyond the physical presence of authority figures, the legal tools for rapid response also include well-defined, procedural frameworks. Rules of court behavior are codified and known to all participants in advance. Legal professionals, parties in a case, and even public observers are expected to adhere to these rules. When someone steps outside of those boundaries, whether through speech, gesture, or action, the response is not invented on the spot. It follows pre-established procedures. This predictability enables the legal system to move quickly with confidence and consistency. Timing is also critical in terms of impact. A disruption that is not addressed immediately can have ripple effects. Witnesses may become nervous or unwilling to testify. Jurors could be influenced by emotionally charged outbursts. Lawyers might be thrown off their arguments or feel pressured by the atmosphere. The judge, whose role is to remain neutral and guide the proceedings fairly, could find their ability to manage the case compromised. Even a small delay in responding to inappropriate conduct can magnify these consequences, resulting in procedural complications or even mistrials. Swift responses help prevent escalation. What begins as a verbal outburst or symbolic act of defiance can quickly grow into a larger disruption, if not checked promptly. The immediacy of a fine or an arrest functions not only as a response to the individual involved, but also as a signal to everyone present. The rules apply, and they will be enforced. This signal can restore calm, reassure participants, and allow the proceedings to continue with the seriousness and concentration they require. It is important to recognize that this kind of enforcement is not arbitrary. Judges are trained to differentiate between moments that require intervention and those that may benefit from tolerance or verbal redirection. The speed of the response does not mean it is unthinking or unfeeling. In fact, it reflects a deep understanding of human behavior and courtroom dynamics. Judges must constantly evaluate the mood of the room, the potential for escalation, and the impact of every decision they make. When they act quickly, it is often the result of a careful calculation made under pressure. This responsiveness is not just about managing the present moment, it also plays a role in setting precedent. Each courtroom decision is part of a broader, legal tradition. When courts fail to respond to misconduct, they risk sending a message that such behavior is tolerable, or worse, that the court lacks the authority to control its own proceedings. Future cases may then face increased difficulties, as participants recall previous instances where rules were broken without consequence. By responding quickly and visibly, courts protect not only the integrity of a single trial, but also the reputation of the judicial system as a whole. The public also plays a role in this equation. In an age where courtroom moments are often broadcast, reported or shared online, The timing of a judicial response can influence public perception. A delay in enforcement might lead to criticism or doubt about the court's ability to manage itself. An immediate, appropriate action, on the other hand, reinforces the idea that justice is not only fair, but firm. This helps build and maintain public trust, which is essential for the legitimacy of any legal institution. Educationally, the principle of timely enforcement within courtrooms can be used to teach broader civic lessons. It demonstrates that the rule of law is not a passive idea, but an active framework that requires constant maintenance. It shows that authority, when exercised responsibly and promptly, can coexist with justice and fairness. And it illustrates that structure, when upheld consistently, allows even the most emotionally charged disputes to be resolved peacefully and equitably. Understanding the responsiveness of the judicial system helps to illuminate how laws operate not only in theory, but in practice. It highlights the complexity of courtroom management and the importance of readiness. Ultimately, the legal system's ability to respond quickly to challenges is a reflection of its stability and maturity, developed over time to balance fairness with firmness, order with rights, and justice with authority. The relationship between the judiciary and law enforcement is a vital part of the justice system, particularly within the setting of a courtroom. Their roles, though distinct, must operate in seamless coordination to ensure that proceedings are conducted with order, integrity, and fairness. One of the most visible moments of this collaboration is when court rulings or decisions require immediate enforcement. In these instances, law enforcement does not act independently or arbitrarily, but rather in direct response to the authority vested in the judiciary. This coordination is fundamental to preserving the rule of law and ensuring that justice is not merely declared but also executed. Law enforcement officials, including bailiffs, sheriffs, and officers assigned to courtroom duty, operate under a specific set of responsibilities when inside a courtroom. Their presence is not just ceremonial or protective, it is functional. These officers are the physical extension of the court's authority. When a judge issues a directive, such as an order to remove a disruptive individual, impose a fine, or carry out a custodial action, it is the duty of law enforcement to ensure that the directive is enforced safely, promptly, and lawfully. This function supports the judiciary's need to maintain decorum and control within its own environment. The need for such coordination becomes particularly evident when courtroom behavior escalates. If someone violates court rules through loud, offensive, or obstructive conduct, the courtroom can quickly shift from a controlled legal space to one of potential chaos. In these moments, a judge may issue an immediate ruling to address the disruption, be it a warning, a fine, or even an arrest. But the judge does not leave the bench to carry out these actions. Instead, it is law enforcement, standing by in readiness, who execute the decision. This division of labor preserves the judge's impartial role and ensures that the enforcement of the ruling is carried out by trained professionals who are equipped to manage the situation appropriately. The legal foundation for this coordination is built on statutes and court protocols that clearly define the roles and limits of both judges and law enforcement officers. Judges are empowered to make rulings and issue orders. Law enforcement is authorized to act on those orders. There is no ambiguity in these roles. Officers are not expected to evaluate or question the decisions made by the bench in real time. Their task is to implement the court's directives in accordance with legal guidelines and established procedures. This clarity ensures efficiency and minimizes the chance of conflict or confusion in tense situations. Importantly, law enforcement's actions within a courtroom are subject to oversight and accountability. While they act under the authority of the court, their methods must remain proportional and lawful. If a situation escalates to the point of physical intervention, officers are trained to de-escalate and restrain as necessary, always aiming to protect the rights of all individuals involved. Their training is tailored to the courtroom context, where public scrutiny is high and the stakes, often involving personal freedoms, reputations, or significant legal outcomes, are serious. The trust between the judiciary and law enforcement is built not just on legal necessity but on mutual respect and shared purpose. Both institutions serve the public interest by upholding laws, protecting rights, and ensuring justice. In the courtroom, this shared mission comes into sharp focus. When a decision is made by the bench and enforced swiftly by officers, it reflects a system in which authority is respected and where decisions are not symbolic but actionable. This reinforces the legitimacy of both the courts and the officers who serve them. Beyond the walls of the courtroom, this coordinated relationship also sets a public standard for how lawful authority is to be interpreted and respected. When people observe law enforcement calmly and professionally enforcing judicial orders, it builds public confidence in the system's ability to manage conflict without descending into chaos. It shows that order is not dependent on force, but on a structure where decisions are made through due process and implemented by those entrusted with that responsibility. This coordination also plays a preventive role. The visible presence of law enforcement in the courtroom, combined with the knowledge that judicial rulings will be enforced promptly, discourages disruptive behavior before it begins. It creates an atmosphere of seriousness and respect, signaling that while all parties will be treated fairly, breaches of decorum will not be tolerated. This preemptive effect allows legal proceedings to continue with focus and efficiency, minimizing the risk of delay or mistrial. Moreover, the collaboration between courts and law enforcement underscores an important civic lesson. The strength of a democratic society lies not just in the laws it passes, but in how those laws are upheld. When judicial rulings are carried out promptly and responsibly, it demonstrates that the system is functional, accountable, and prepared. It communicates to citizens that justice is not an abstract concept, but a living process that requires the cooperation of multiple institutions working together in harmony. At the same time, this relationship requires ongoing training, communication, and refinement. Both judges and law enforcement personnel must remain informed about changes in legal standards, procedural rules, and civil rights protections. They must work together regularly, not only during moments of conflict, but through routine interaction, to build understanding and trust. This ongoing relationship ensures that when high-stress situations arise, both sides are prepared to act quickly, appropriately, and within the bounds of the law. In more complex courtroom situations, such as high-profile cases or emotionally charged hearings, this coordination becomes even more critical. Emotions can run high, tensions can escalate quickly, and public scrutiny is intense. In such cases, the seamless partnership between the judiciary and law enforcement serves as a stabilizing force. It allows the court to proceed with its legal obligations while ensuring that the environment remains secure and respectful for all participants, from litigants and attorneys to witnesses and jurors. What emerges from this understanding is a clearer appreciation for the role that enforcement plays in the broader legal system. Judicial authority, while grounded in law, must be supported by the capacity to act. Without this capability, court rulings would risk becoming hollow declarations, unenforceable and easily disregarded. The collaboration with law enforcement ensures that rulings have weight, that behavior within courtrooms aligns with established norms, and that the process of justice can move forward with the confidence and structure that society expects. In reflecting on the importance of courtroom order, timely enforcement, and the seamless coordination between judicial authority and law enforcement, it becomes clear that these elements are not simply procedural necessities, they are foundational to the integrity of the legal system itself. Every time a ruling is made, a directive is issued, or a disruption is addressed, the justice system reaffirms its role as a protector of fairness, balance, and the rule of law. Without swift and structured responses, the courtroom would risk becoming an unstable environment where emotions rather than principles dictate outcomes. This would erode public trust and ultimately weaken the democratic institutions that rely on impartial and effective legal processes. The courtroom must remain a place where rules are upheld, not because of fear or intimidation, but because of a shared understanding of their purpose. The procedures that guide judges, the conduct expected of those who enter the courtroom, and the lawful responses carried out by officers are all designed to ensure that every person is heard within a framework of respect and equity. The enforcement of courtroom decorum, then, is not about silencing voices. It is about creating a space where all voices can be heard without disruption, threat, or bias. Furthermore, when the justice system responds with both decisiveness and transparency, it teaches valuable lessons to the broader public. It demonstrates that no one is above the law, and that even the most emotionally charged expressions must be balanced against the need for order and due process. It reminds citizens that their rights are best protected in a system that prioritizes both liberty and accountability. Every enforcement action within a courtroom should not only address an immediate issue, but also reinforce the long-term integrity of the process. In today's world, where legal proceedings are often broadcast, analyzed, and discussed far beyond the courtroom walls, the actions taken inside have broader implications. A courtroom that maintains its standards under pressure shows the public that justice is not performative. It is principled. It confirms that law and order are not opposites, a freedom, but necessary counterparts to it. The moment-to-moment decisions made by judges and the rapid, lawful responses of officers are not merely institutional routines. They are acts that preserve the credibility and strength of the entire judicial framework. Ultimately, maintaining courtroom order and enforcing judicial rulings is a shared responsibility rooted in mutual respect and professionalism. When courts and law enforcement work in tandem, guided by law and tempered by fairness, they become more than institutions. They become the guardians of justice. Their collaboration ensures that what happens in the courtroom resonates far beyond it, reaffirming the values of accountability, structure, and lawful expression that form the cornerstone of any functioning democracy.